Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Thank you for joining me tonight. Today is Thursday, September 18th, the very first show back, the very first evening news show since debuting my new website, tjpsnews.com, my new website for my independent investigative journalism, and really everything that is known to TJPS News will be on this website. I've been posting some brief updates in regards to what's been happening here at the show. I was supposed to interview those three Missouri state representatives that sat in courageously and tenaciously in the state capitol to protest the racist redistricting map there. That interview was once again scheduled to appear on the Jeremiah Patterson Show last week, but unfortunately it was canceled. But I do have another interview coming up this weekend, actually, so very excited for that. You're going to want to stay tuned in regards to the announcement of that guest in that show, which is going to be very, very powerful and influential. That's once again, that's going to be this Saturday here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Be sure that you're not only subscribed here on YouTube to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, but also to my website, tjpsnews.com, where you will get updates, news, and really just everything regarding what's going to be going forward here on the show. Tonight, I just wanted to sort of deliver a message, not only of the facts, but also a message of continued resistance, because it is in a period like this where many people can begin to grow weary in doing good. Many people can begin to essentially grow hopeless in believing essentially that the only way to survive going forward is capitulation, or the only way to survive going forward is anticipatory obedience. And we should be very clear about this. We are living in a fascist state. We are living under an authoritarian dictatorship. It is not hyperbolic to say that. We are not waiting for fascism to arrive. We are not waiting for an authoritarian dictatorship to arrive. It is here. And so with that, we have diagnosed the problem. Now you have to counter that threat. And the only way to counter such a threat is mass resistance, because mass resistance always defeats authoritarianism. And it only works if the civilian population as a collective is willing to defeat that by actively resisting. Resistance is proactive. It is not something where you just wait. Resistance does not entail you essentially just sitting, waiting, and believing that there are going to be a midterms in 2026, so we'll wait till 2026 to make change. That is not proactive resistance. If you are going to be a part of the resistance movement, it has to be proactive. It has to be influential. It has to be consistent. And so one of the very first rules that I wrote about in my book, Resistance, A Strategic Guide on How to Fight Back, last year after the election, one of the very first rules I wrote in this book is rule number 1, do not isolate. Quote, in a time like this, it is normal to feel hopeless and despondent. Those feelings are completely valid and should be acknowledged and processed. But do not isolate. Isolation and silence teach wannabe authoritarian actors what they can do. If people relinquish to despair and stay at home, there will be no one to counter, question, or protest the authoritarian agenda being put in place. Isolating and remaining silent is anticipatory obedience, essentially teaching power that it can control you and regulate your emotions. Again, if everyone is scared, if everyone begins to get silent or isolates, then you have the situation where there is collective anticipatory obedience because everyone has capitulated. No one is talking or speaking out for fear of retaliation. That's what an authoritarian government wants. And if they can make enough people afraid, you eventually do get anticipatory obedience from the rest of the population because, okay, they're like, well, it's better to be quiet and capitulate than to continue speaking out because that's dangerous. That risk me being arrested. That risk my show being pulled off the air. That would risk, something more sinister that happens in authoritarian states happening to me. I get that. But you have to continue to be a part of the resistance movement. Otherwise, we are going to solidify us being here. Because again, the only way to defeat mass The only way to defeat authoritarianism is mass resistance. It has worked before in the past. It works in history. It works still now. But again, that takes society as a collective saying, okay, we are not going to allow this to happen in our country. We are going to continue to resist. So once again, rule number 1, do not isolate. This is rule number 2. Do not underestimate. Insisting or suggesting a wannabe authoritarian leader can't or won't do something because it's too extreme or has never been done before implies one does not know or understand history. The first mistake is to undermine or underestimate the wannabe autocrat, especially when they have engaged in dehumanizing, dangerous, and incendiary rhetoric or have incited political violence. When Trump suggests things like the FCC chair already being politicized as that is, not only going after NPR and PBS, these credible, essential institutions, journalistic institutions in American society, but also going after essentially networks and instant media organizations that participate in quote unquote negative coverage of the president. When an authoritarian leader suggests that they are going to do that, they will. And that does not just mean going after the mainstream enterprises. That also means going after people like me. That means going after your independent journalists. And that also means going after your investigative journalists because that is a threat. And that also means, unfortunately, going after comedians. Because what do comedians do? Comedians make fun of politicians. Comedians make fun of celebrities. Comedians make fun of the state. Because you have that in a functioning democratic society. But when you cross the line into an authoritarian dictatorship, when you cross the line into a fascist country, well, that no longer can exist. So, of course, the FCC chair is going to be politicized to then police those type of groups, to then police those type of individuals so that they cannot talk. And so that the rest of the people that are speaking out, that are talking, what that's going to look like is, boom, anticipatory obedience starts, capitulation. Then you have people softening their message. And then what you effectively get, without even having to ask for it, is state media, where there is only positive coverage of said authoritarian leader. Where there is only positive wall-to-wall coverage of the authoritarian leader because people, institutions, media organizations are afraid to criticize. They are afraid to say the obvious truth. That's where we are right now. I mean, when you get headlines like Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert having their shows pulled off the air, having their shows canceled, this is where we are as a country. And a country where even comedians cannot make fun of the leader, that is not a country you want to live in. That is a country where quote unquote free speech is policed, because in a country like that, you only have a system where the right is safe, but the left is not. So the right can have freedom of speech, but the left cannot. Because anything that the left says will be construed as hate speech. Anything that the left said will be construed as speech that is antithetical to the belief system and to the desired goals of the authoritarian leader. So therefore, that is dangerous. So when they talk about going after left-wing media organizations, cracking down on them significantly after the murder of Charlie Kirk, they mean that, and they're serious about that, and that is a threat that should be taken seriously. That is a threat that should not be underestimated, because they are coming for that side. They are coming for the left side. They are coming for independent journalists. They are coming for investigative journalists. They are coming after your Midas Touches. They are coming after your Aaron Parnases. They are coming after these large groups on the left, these large institutions, these individuals with large followings on TikTok, on YouTube, Substack, whatever platforms they may be, and they're cracking down. Because again, if you're in an authoritarian, fascistic dictatorship state, you cannot have a functioning society for your people if the left gets to say whatever they want still, but the right doesn't. So what you have is free speech and censorship. What you have is free speech / censorship. So you have censorship on the left, and you have free speech somewhat on the right. Because then what you do is you eventually get to a state where no side can criticize the government. No side can say anything at all. I mean, it's written about, in our Constitution, in our Declaration of Independence, you have the right to protest or to, have the right to express your grievances against the government. In an authoritarian dictatorship, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen at all. And so what you have is this hardcore crackdown on free speech, this hardcore crackdown on what is said, on what is reported on the leader, because the leader can never look bad. No matter who it is, no matter what it is, the leader can never look bad. The leader must always be portrayed as good. So it is nice to have the leader portrayed in savory, delectable headlines, good-looking headlines that make the leader look fairly decent and not as bad. So the leader can do maniacal and nefarious actions like mass deportation and kidnapping immigrants off the street and, saying things like he's going to suspend the Constitution or saying things like he's going to run for a third term. And what the press will do, the press that is now effectively state-controlled media because they have capitulated, what they will do is write about it like it's freaking normal, right? They're going to write about Trump flirting with the possibility of a third term like it's normal. They're going to write about the things that the leader is doing that is completely not normal in a regular functioning democratic society. And they're going to make it seem like it is. And that is where you have to get to the point, again, you cannot underestimate. If the leader says they're going to use the military to shoot civilians, the leader is going to do that. If the leader says they're going to cancel elections, the leader is going to do that. If the leader says they're going to start arresting independent journalists as well as their political opponents, they are going to do that. Do not underestimate what the leader says because it can and it most likely will happen. Again, not only if there's not resistance, but also the naiveness, frankly, of people who believe that the worst is not exactly the worst and the worst won't happen. Every single thing that has been written into stone about Project 2025 effectively is in effect right now, and it is currently happening. None of this is surprising, yes, but it is horrifying. And it is happening again and again and again and again. This is why I continue to say things are going to get worse. So if you want to leave the country, leave now. The institutions in this country, institutions cannot defend themselves when you have a situation where, you have an authoritarian dictatorship. It has to be civilians that actively defend institutions. Think about what has happened so far. Conservatives over the past 50 years have had this strategy effectively to gut the administrative state, to get rid of it completely. And so what has happened over the past 9 months is the federal government has been effectively eviscerated. We have seen hundreds of thousands of federal workers fired. We have seen institutions like the FDA, the CDC, HHS, the CIA, these other incredibly prestigious institutions in the United States government effectively be destabilized and also eviscerated. Congress is full of Republicans. They control both houses, and the United States Congress has abdicated their legislative duties, and they have handed that over to their dictator, Donald Trump. That's what's happening here. You make the government stop functioning so you can do whatever you want as the dear leader, so you can do whatever you want as the authoritarian leader. You can't do that. That's unconstitutional. Oh, really? What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Oh, a judge ruled that I can't do that because it's unconstitutional? Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Matter of fact, let's take it all the way up to the Supreme Court where it's mostly conservative because I appointed most of the guys there. And also, by the way, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court kind of likes us too, so I think that'll work out. That's where we are as a country. That's where we are. If you are speaking to anyone in your current life who is not aware of what's happening, they really should be, because that's also the terrifying part. And that really brings me to my next rule here, which is rule number 3. Study history. History is essential to learn, know, and study. Knowledge is powerful. Understanding and knowing history is more useful than you think. So, when it comes to authoritarian dictatorships, one of the things that they see as a threat is history. What has been recently most attacked under the Trump administration? It has been Black history, right? They're going to start removing the history, the true history of slavery. They're going to start making it sound like it actually wasn't that bad, right? They're going to start doing stuff like that. They're going to start whitewashing it effectively. Also, any other atrocity that has been committed by white supremacists in the United States, we're going to start whitewashing that as well because it makes white people feel uncomfortable. So we are going to change history in effect for our own narrative, and we're going to make it sound completely different and to make it sound more comfortable for us to understand. Also, in effect, why do we have history? What, why do we have history at all? Let's just get rid of that completely. History does not repeat itself, but it does like to rhyme. And so when you have an authoritarian dictatorship, there are two major things that are effectively threats. It's not just resistance, but it's also knowledge and it's also history. Those two things are incredibly dangerous to the succession of an authoritarian state. They don't want that. They don't want people learning and they don't want people studying history at all. Because it's dangerous to study the past to know how to deal with the future. It's dangerous to study historical examples of resistance to know how to deal with how to fight back currently. And it's really useful and it's also highly important. And what you'll begin to see is the rewriting of history and also gaslighting you into believing that what happened in the past is not actually what happened in the past, but also making it more difficult for future generations to contest that as a fact because you have changed and misconstrued history so much to where it's almost imperceptible. That's what they're trying to do here. And that's what they're relatively succeeding in doing. I mean, this whole anti-DEI campaign they're doing, this whole anti-Black history campaign they're doing, all of it is to enrage us, but it is also to make it to whereas, for future generations coming up and also for people currently alive right now, that history is just not available. I mean, I was at Books A Million recently, and there is now a banned books section. And you can see some of the books there that are effectively banned in the United States. They literally have their own banned books section. And I've talked about censorship in the United States as well as in regards to, just banned books. This is what's continuing to happen in this country. Studying history is essential because they are literally getting rid of it. Why would you want to get rid of history? Oh, because once again, that's knowledge. History is a threat to an authoritarian state. All these things are threats. All these things are antithetical to their succession. It is against the message. Because if you are trying to have an authoritarian state where you can effectively get people to submit or get up and coming people to submit, well, you can't have them be smart. You can't have them be filled with knowledge because then once again, that effectively it curtails your plan because then they're smart enough. They have the knowledge to resist. They're also smart in history. So they have that capacity to resist as well. You get rid of that, you effectively win. And so you kind of get books like this also warning you about stuff. Why fascists fear teachers, public education, and the future of democracy. They're also going after education as well. So all these things collectively are attacked. You can't have comedians on TV because they can't be making jokes about, that side. They can't be making jokes about the dear leader. We are living in a time right now where they are trying to break your spirit. We are living in a time right now where they are trying to make it so unbearable, so dangerous, so incredibly demoralizing that no one wants to resist, that no one wants to speak up, that no one wants to protest, that no one wants to continue getting in, as the late John Lewis referred to as good trouble. But it is then, under those circumstances, under the most difficult and tumultuous circumstances, that resistance, that fury, that fiery passion that you once felt for human rights, that fury and that fiery passion that you once felt, and you may still feel just a little bit, that has to be reinvigorated. Because it really is at this juncture, at this period in the race, where many people begin to give up, where many people begin to submit, capitulate. That anticipatory obedience grows, it becomes infectious. But as Vice President Kamala Harris has always said, courage is also contagious. Courage is also infectious. And they're trying to break your spirit. They're trying to overload the news cycle with so much negativity, with so much despondent headlines that you feel like the fight's not worth it anymore. But the only way that authoritarian governments have ever fallen in history, the only way that fascists and dictators have only fallen in history, was because of mass resistance. It was because of the collective of the public to come together to say, no, we are not going to allow this to happen, and to stand up and to continue to fight back. Because the public really is the last line of defense. Once the public submits and capitulates, that's it. That authoritarian dictatorship is effectively solidified. Because elected officials can only do so much. There has to be collective resistance, united resistance from the people. And the power is with the people. So, I just wanted to get on here tonight to just say they're trying to break your spirit, but don't you let them. My first investigative journalism trip is coming up very soon, September 25th through September 28th. I'll be in Baltimore, Maryland, investigating what's going on down there. Of course, the threat to deploy the National Guard, as well as the racist redistricting map that they've been implementing all across the country. Maryland is going to be fighting back. I'm going to be trying to secure some interviews with elected officials and really just bring back a full investigative journalism report on the situation in Maryland. So thank you so very much for watching this new TJPS Evening News Show tonight. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe to my website, tjpsnews.com. You can also follow us on TikTok at The Jeremiah Patterson Show. Subscribe here on YouTube at The Jeremiah Patterson Show. And if you'd like to support my work, as financial contributions are very important since I am an independent investigative journalist, ways to donate are on my website. Of course, to the Truth in Transit section, there is a way to donate there. You can also donate to my GoFundMe, TJPS News, there to support and to sustain my work. And of course, these are other ways to support my work as well. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you this Saturday.